Welcome to episode 4 of the Hipsters United podcast. My name is Chris, and accompanying me this week to talk pumpkins are Jason.
Hello.
And Jill has returned.
Hello from Hawaii, almost. I wish I was still there.
This week we're going to take on that stickiest of topics, who, as in what complement of band members, are the Smashing Pumpkins. But first I'd like to welcome Jill back from Hawaii and get her opinions on the topics we touched on during her absence. Jill, have you had a chance to listen to the shows that you missed?
I certainly have.
Outstanding. So, do you want to give us your take, kind of briefly here, on the swirling rumors? Which of the upcoming Pumpkins releases, tours, whatnot that have been rumored are you most looking forward to, or do you think is going to happen the most?
In terms of the live shows, the upcoming fall live shows, I'm really excited about those. As I live in New York, and I went to school in Chicago, so I'll definitely be, making those stops. They indeed are going to be returning to the big three cities. Who knows? Maybe I'll make it out to California. So that's probably what I'm most excited about. I think that the archive releases that they're talking about are probably going to be delayed quite a bit. I think it's going to take a while to figure out really the plan of attack there, and kind of how to distribute them to fans that are both, sort of the hardcore fan base, as well as marketing them to a wider audience. And as far as, the era shows, they'll be great. I probably, if they do in fact happen, I would be right up there with you, Chris, and seeing the pre-Gish and Gish shows.
Sweet.
I actually, this past year, I don't know if you knew this, but at one point I was kind of a bootleg specialist in the 1991 shows. I dug up a lot of old 91 shows. And this past year, actually on tour, when we went to Asheville and a couple of other places, I think, where was I? Maybe Philadelphia. I met a few of the old school tapers that, had taped them in 90 and 91. They hardly remembered anything about it because Lord knows what they were doing at the time. But those shows had like a really, even though they sound awful now to our, totally spoiled Shep's ears, the energy of the songs back then would be really exciting to hear again. So, I look forward to anything that the Pumpkins are going to be putting out that's new. I think it's really exciting to see them, taking the time to go back into the studio and actually build a studio that they want to work in. It's, I think one thing that I would even contribute to the discussion is I think they're probably going to be working this summer a lot on, for lack of a better term, like the Pumpkins operations. So from a business standpoint, they'll probably renovate the website. They're going to be hiring, the new writers for the website. They're going to be doing PR and outreach and try to build the community back up now that they've been on their feet for, over a year now. So I think there's a lot of exciting things that they're going to be doing. And like Jason mentioned in the last podcast, there's no rest for the weary. This band works so hard, and they work, nonstop to both fulfill their artistic vision and, try to make their fans happy, I think. So I'm even though it's going to be some slow news days on Hipsters United, I think it's going to be ultimately really cool what they come up with. So
Outstanding. Well, before we jump into the news, I have a quick update from last week's show. A commenter in our show notes pointed out that although I contend that there's no studio version of Towers of Rabble, and I was fairly strong in my language there, Billy made a comment to the contrary in the famous Guitar Geek USA article from Guitar World. I believe it was from January of 1997. And in this article, he actually had a little sentence or two comment about all of the songs that were released in the Aeroplane Flies High box set. And for one of the songs, the song Blank, Billy's comments were, he referenced Towers of Rabble in it. He said, at the last minute, the song Blank replaced a song called Towers of Rabble because I think I liked that one even less, that one being Towers of Rabble. Um, I'm still going to stick with my contention. I know the version of Blank that was released eventually on the Tonight Tonight single as a B-side was the same version of Blank, I believe, that was on the Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness demo tape that was from even before the Double Door show that we reviewed last week. And I think that it may have replaced Towers of Rabble on the set list, but I wouldn't necessarily think that Towers of Rabble was most definitely recorded maybe in the same way that Blank was recorded, just Billy with an acoustic guitar. I don't know. I'm not really holding out hope for Towers of Rabble, although clearly there still are some people out there that are.
Rabble rousing.
Zing!
Ravelhead.
And I'm out!
He'll be here all week.
Wah, wah.
And I think I heard Andrew there in the background. Andrew, are you joining us this week?
I just decided to join in, yes.
Outstanding.
Hi, Andrew.
Hello, Jill.
Well, let's get to the news then. This week in the news, a rumor surfaced via blogger James Damastis that Billy may be involved in a future iteration of the Guitar Hero franchise. And the Guitar Hero part of it I would file squarely in the rumor bin for now, but we do know that the Pumpkins music is becoming increasingly prevalent in video games. So by my count, you have Cherub Rock in Guitar Hero 3, Cherub Rock, Siva, and now Zero in Rock Band. Today is in SingStar, or will soon be in SingStar. 1979 was in the recently released Grand Theft Auto 4, and even Tarantula was in Tony Hawk's Proving Ground. I believe that came out sometime last year. And based on Billy's comments around the Virgin lawsuit a few months ago, it's my assumption that Billy and Jimmy own the rights to include their songs in these games, and that this isn't like Virgin or I guess they were under Warner Brothers most recently, Virgin or Warner Brothers doing the promotion here. So Andrew, since you've joined us, we'll cut to you first here. What do you think they're going after here promotionally wise?
Well, I guess they're looking to. I think they recognize the fact that games like Rock Band and Guitar Hero are pretty popular, and it's a good avenue for people who maybe, the kids who weren't around in the 90s when they were popular the first time, and reintroduce themselves to a whole new fan base, I'm sure. Billy's made no bones about the fact he's not out just to play old songs. He's out to, put out new music and make new fans. So this is a good, decent way to do that. And it's also, I'm sure it's probably pretty interesting too to take part in one of those motion capture sessions that apparently he did recently.
Jason, are you a gamer? Have you played Guitar Hero or Rock Band or any of the Pumpkin songs in those?
No.
What about you, Jill?
I've witnessed it, but I have not played myself. So
I have played Cherub Rock and Rock Band, and it's pretty fun. And I think it's definitely, now that there's not as much of a stigma, I think we talked about this a few weeks ago, there's not as much of a stigma nowadays on bands kind of putting their music out there, like both in commercials and in video games like this. I think it's just Billy and Jimmy's way of getting their music out there with everybody else. And I mean, it is another revenue stream. People like to kind of avoid the talk of the band making money off of their work, but this is a way that they can kind of fund their efforts to make new music. And it's, I mean, in my opinion, if they're putting their music in a rhythm and music game, I think it goes pretty well. It's not, the traditional selling out where they're just slapping their stuff everywhere. And what about, do any of you guys think that, I mean, it's kind of the same idea with the movie soundtracks. So last year they were in Transformers, I guess, and this year I saw they're going to be in the new Hulk movie that's coming out. Is that probably kind of the same idea, I guess?
Well, I think that, first of all, I totally agree with Andrew in that I think it's a great market for them to be in, both to kind of appease those of us who may be past our video game playing prime, but still indulge those tendencies occasionally, or not so occasionally, as it were for a lot of my friends. But I think it's a great place for them to be exposing their music to a new audience. But I also think there's a genuine sort of childlike amusement from the band that they're actually getting to be a part of this these adventures, I guess. Like you said, Chris, earlier this week, I had, Jason dug up the article where Billy Corgan went to the premiere of Iron Man. You're totally right. Their Doomsday Clock was included in the new Incredible Hulk movie premiere, well, trailer, I guess, on Apple. And I had read a little bit about how Corgan is a big comic book fan. So I'm sure it's really amusing to them just to be included, because it's kind of isn't it every teenage or young boys sort of be part of the superhero league? And I don't know, I'm a girl, I don't know anything about this stuff, but from what I read, there was a lot of press around how Corgan had really grown up on comic books. So I think it's a cool.
All right. Well, our final news story this week will lead us into our in-depth discussion. So former Zwan guitarist David Pajo made some comments this week about his time in Zwan, touching on the percepted arrogance of Billy Corgan and how Billy, quote, beat the sound and life out of music. So, Jason, this one's a fastball right in your wheelhouse. Go ahead and knock it out of the park for us.
Well, I think Pajo and Billy actually have some things in common. I mean, when I write blog posts at Hipsters United, a blog about the Smashing Pumpkins, hipstersunited.com, I tend to kind of sprinkle these posts with links that maybe from reading the post you're not exactly clear where this link is going to take you, but I try to make them. I don't do anything too silly with them, I think. But one of the links I had was to a recent interview with Pajo, and it struck me how he's moved on from Zwan, and then whatever he was doing after that. I believe he was pursuing a solo project under the name Pajo, which is about solo name number 6, I think, in his career now. Guy really has an identity crisis. But this new act he has is a metal band called Dead Child, and in this interview that I linked to, if you read it, and let me click on it really quick and give due credit where credit is due. It's an interview conducted on a website called donewaiting.com. And it's interesting because Pajo lashes out at the indie music community, of all things for him to lash out at. He's frustrated that he's turned to metal now, and that all his old indie friends don't want to have anything to do with him anymore because he's doing this music that is so like, oh my god, I can't believe you're doing metal, so he was really mad. He dropped a couple F-bombs in the general direction of what he termed, the indie community and these critics of him. So obviously, walking in terrain that Billy walked maybe 20 years ago, but clearly something in common with them. So I say this to say that I don't want to go after Mr. Pajo hammer and tongs here. It's what struck me about his comments more than anything is that, he talks about Billy's arrogance and or something about Billy kept saying that he'd sold millions of records, and that is true. He did sell millions of records. I can understand that it would be annoying if someone kept mentioning seemingly gratuitously that they had sold millions of records. I am not so crazy as to think that would not be annoying. But the funny thing I thought was that here's what Pajo says about Billy's arrogance. That's one of the reasons I initially liked the guy. He was so arrogant it cracked me up. I think Dave Pajo and I probably have different operational definitions of the word like, or what it is to like someone. I liked that I had such a negative opinion of him. And then I joined a band and spent 18 months in the band with the guy because it was just such a trip. That seems really. I mean, you want to talk about. A lot of people say Corgan takes himself too seriously, and I'd want to ask Pajo. Is there such a thing as taking yourself not seriously enough? Because to pal around with a guy for 18 months in a band and he's so arrogant, and just be sitting there laughing at him. I mean. that's a weird way to spend 18 months of your precious time on this planet.
And it begs the question, like, you're gonna be in a band with someone, you don't even listen to music that he's made in the past to see whether you kind of are on the same wavelength as them and want to be in a band with them. Like, I don't think anyone held a gun to his head and said, you have to be in Zwan.
Yeah, and he claims not to like the music. He says, I don't want to talk too much shit about Billy, but he really does know how to beat the sound and life out of music. Did Billy just discover how to beat the sound and life out of music starting in the year 2001 when he formed Zwan? I think most observers think that Billy's work in Zwan was a fairly natural extension of the work he'd done in the Pumpkins. I don't think people think it's a completely different thing. So, maybe Dave Pajo, when he heard the Pumpkins, was like, wow, they're full of sound and life. And then he got into Zwan and he's like, this is not full of sound and life. But that seems ridiculous to me. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you completely, Chris, and at least in what I think you're implying, which is that it begs the question, why did you join this band? You know?
Yeah, and plus he made a comment also in the interview about he was kind of ragging on Billy for either wanting to be an artist or wanting to write music to make money. Like, aren't these discussions you need to have before you join the band? You know, why are we forming this band? What are our goals as a band? Or do you just kind of like roll in there with your guitar and then, oh, I didn't know we were going to be doing this, and then just go
getting
talk
this band
trash?
to be successful.
Well, I think, the thing that really rubs me the wrong way about this entire interview is the fact that it seems like he's, yet again like other music critics, being inflammatory just for being the sake of being inflammatory. And he seems to be so over it in the kind of blasé, nonchalant way that he talks about it. He's moved on to his death metal band. So these are just, little trinkets of, knowledge of his past history. So I'm just sharing this with you to be funny and to show you how ludicrous the situation was, because everyone wants to hate Billy Corgan in the media.
I'm gonna diss Billy Corgan, but like if you actually want to like come back at me and talk about this, like whatever.
Exactly. Exactly. And it seems I was talking with Jason about this earlier. It's hilarious to me because Slint reunited last year just for a few one-off shows, but if you can kind of nonchalantly take that into account too, and he's decided to kind of relive the glory days of his of the band that made him famous as an indie rock god, for lack of a better term. I would argue that Slint is probably the first indie rock band to really popularize the indie rock sentiment. All the math rock kids I knew in college were just so geared up about Slint. I'm like, dude, this music is 20 years old at this point, or no, I guess at that point it was 10 years old. And you were in third grade when this was coming out, so how can you really love this? But to each his own. And my point is that when a band like Slint reunites and has a reunion tour, it's kind of a nostalgic thing, and I think that it's given Pajo a platform to kind of say what he wants in a very unserious manner, like Jason was saying. Whereas any sort of criticism directed towards the reunion or the new iteration of the Smashing Pumpkins takes weight because they're actually looking to move forward. So I don't know.
They're trying. They're actually trying.
They're trying. And Dave Pajo has just resigned himself to, I'm totally over, whether it be Papa M or Ariel M or Pajo or whatever his, multi-personality disorder has decided he's performing as this time. He's basically eschewed any criticism of himself because he's, over that and into death metal now.
Yeah, I mean, we got Slint together and we played Spiderland in order. And, like, if you want to say it sucks, do I care? No, because I'm not really into Slint. I'm doing Dead Child. It's like, okay. So you got together in the show, you played a big festival, and you mailed it in. And that's okay? That's the exact sort of thing that if Billy Corgan and the Smashing Pumpkins did it, these people would freak out. Oh, they mailed it in and they played this huge festival. Unbelievable.
Well, he's not in this to be an artist or to make money. He's just in there to blow out some windows.
It's all about the rock.
And I think that this type of an interview is not really surprising from Pajo. I might have expected it more, albeit a much funnier version from Matt Sweeney. But it's not unsurprising to see this coming in from David Pajo just because of, the interactions that I'd had with him, and I was never very impressed with him as a person in general. So, join a band, but embrace the band. I mean, if this is like your 25th band, heck, he was in Tortoise. If this is your 25th band, don't turn around and tongue lash it after the fact. It's not. What are you achieving besides getting your next 10 seconds of fame?
To go off on a very slight tangent, it is actually strongly related. I know some people are probably wondering why we'd make such a big deal out of this. But, if anything kind of sticks in your craw, it's this guy kind of going out of your way to say Billy Corgan's music, has the life beaten out of it, right?
And isn't even worthy of his time to listen to.
Well, I don't care if David Pajo doesn't like it, and I don't care if he doesn't listen to it. But it seems like he's making a stronger claim than that. Billy knows how to beat the sound and life out of music. I guarantee you, take 100 people, play them Spiderland, the classic Slint album, and play them Mary Star of the Sea, and 99 out of 100 will tell you Mary Star of the Sea has more life, has more energy. The Slint album, the vocals are talking, and they're like talking nearly inaudibly. It'd be like, "This is the song. I am singing the song right now to you," and it's like they're like literally trying not to sing, trying not to try to sing, like trying not.
They're so over it.
Our debut album, we are so over it.
If you don't sing, no one can criticize your singing voice.
Absolutely, no guts, no glory, and no life, frankly. And if Billy's music so lacks life, why was Pajo sexually attracted to so many of its diehard fans?
No, it's true.
Why was he chasing all the Zwan fans who love Billy Corgan? It's like maybe there's some self-loathing going on there, or a lot of it. I mean, at a bare minimum, if he genuinely doesn't like Billy Corgan and doesn't like Billy Corgan's music, I mean, he can't have thought much of the thoughts of. He can't have. Hey, look, you got some girl who really loves Billy Corgan's music. Dave Pajo's got to be thinking, well, she's kind of dumb and doesn't have good taste, but hey, she's there.
It's good enough for me.
It apparently, that's, we played that little clip, the start of his album that came out around that time, and the first words on his album are him talking, "I am a whore," and now he's 40 and he's playing house parties with his metal band. So, you go negative on me, Dave Pajo, and you say the music I like lacks life. I go negative on you. Oh, snap.
Well, and you gotta wonder,
podcast in the house.
You gotta wonder what the heck he even means by beating the sound and life out of music, because if anything, and from the limited interactions that I had with the band at that point, it was more of the same very strong work ethic that you see from the Pumpkins right now. And if Billy is saying, hey, we got to be in sound check for 5 hours before this show, maybe that's what he's addressing, is that the work ethic was high and he wasn't up to snuff. I'm sure, he and Sweeney would have rather been in the in the dressing room smoking some dope. So it's not that I can, not that I can discredit them for wanting to do that, but it's just it's a totally different environment that Pajo should have been aware of before he would have even gone in the band. Otherwise, you got to question his motives for doing so, whether they be fame or money or not, whatnot. So,
Or he just wanted to sit around and make fun of everyone, which, you know.
there's plenty of those people in the world too.
It was a 18-month joke on Billy and everyone who ever bought his one album.
I guess.
And I guess he's still laughing.
He's still laughing, yes.
So as previously mentioned, in our in-depth discussion this week, I wanted to talk about the band member issue. So when Billy first announced his desire to revive the Smashing Pumpkins, it was quickly leaked that Jimmy was on board as well, which we all kind of expected. But the duo remained silent on who else would be joining them on stage, and Pumpkins fan message boards went crazy when James Iha revealed that he would not be taking part. Stories differ on whether or not James or Darcy were invited to rejoin the band. I believe Jimmy implied in an interview at one point that they were, but Billy pointed out during a post-Rock Walk interview, the Rock Walk thing has just been the gift that keeps on giving as far as this podcast goes, but in that interview with the representative from Fox News, he said that he hasn't spoken to James or Darcy since they left the band in 1999 and 2000 respectively. Unfortunately, I was not able to rip the audio from the interview to play here, but basically Billy expressed regret that he was unable to maintain positive personal relationships with his bandmates, even if their professional relationship had to end. And there were a lot of fans last spring when the revival was beginning who were very upset that Billy and Jimmy were using the name Smashing Pumpkins without James or Darcy's involvement, while the two themselves, as well as former touring bassist Melissa Oftermar, have said that you really only need Billy and Jimmy to make a Pumpkins record. So Jill, we'll start off with you since you've been missing in action the past 2 weeks. What were your thoughts when they first announced the new band members? Did it bother you as much as it seemed to bother some people in the fan community?
That's an interesting question. When I originally found out that they were going to be reuniting, period, I was actually pretty dubious about the whole thing. I had actually had a couple of, the breakup of Zwan had kind of left a sour taste in my mouth, much like David Pajo, perhaps. And I was not really into Corgan's solo career. But when they announced that they were going to be reforming the Smashing Pumpkins or reuniting, whatever, reviving them, whatever you guys have decided you want to call it, I was curious, and once they had announced, it was no surprise that Darcy was not going to be included, because who knows where she even is. I think she had so many snowballing problems at one point that it just was, in her best interest to kind of dodge the public eye altogether. It was disappointing that James was going to be, he was not going to be included, but I think Billy had made that pretty clear when he laid blame on James a couple of years prior to that, right? I think that was like some sort of a journal entry that he had written.
Right.
So I was more curious than anything, because I remember distinctly talking to Jason when we had found out who they were going to be touring with, Jeff Schroeder and Ginger Reyes. At that point, I don't think that they had announced Lisa's inclusion until later. But I was more curious than anything, because I've loved this band for a long time. Of course I'm going to be interested. But regarding the actual sort of the ongoing debate, which really is kind of more so beating a dead horse on the forums like Netforia or Blamo or whatever, get over it. They've found 3 great musicians that mesh really well with the band, and the live shows are nothing to be trifled with. They're really great. And I think, actually, I don't know if you all have seen the German television show that was I think it's called Dirk die Nacht, whatever, I don't know, I don't speak German. It's Into the Night with Billy Corgan and Uli John Roth. Billy actually addresses the band member issue a little bit, particularly relating to the recording of the first two studio albums. And he actually talked quite a bit about, I'm actually thinking of transcribing some of these interview portions in the show because it's really interesting. He had talked about how the first few producers they worked with, whether they be with, recording demos or actually recording Gish and Siamese Dream, that the producers said, listen, we know that there are only two people in this band that can play their instruments. So if we record the two other people that cannot play their instruments on this album, it's not going to sound correctly, you know. And Billy made no bones about how he felt at that time, how he felt that was a little awkward to have to go to the other band members and say, you know, I'm going to record all the parts because this is how we feel and we want to have a consistent internal sound. And from that point on, you know, I think it was obvious that like you said earlier, Chris, you only need Billy Corgan and Jimmy Chamberlin to make a Pumpkins record. And he mentioned that, and Billy mentioned actually in the course of this interview, that initially the resentment, there was no resentment from Darcy and James at that point. That they had said, okay, we understand, it's, you know, for the fidelity of the album, go ahead. But I guess as they toured and as it was becoming more publicly known that they had not written or performed on any of the albums, that they started building resentment, and it was coming from, you know, kind of a shameful place. Like they were embarrassed that they had not done it. And
Sure.
As part of that, it became known to the media community, and the media community had kind of written it up as, oh, well, he's a controlling egomaniac. And Billy addressed this himself in this interview. He had, you know, he very clearly stated that he didn't want to come across as a controlling, you know, manipulative tyrant, but for the sake of the album, they had all agreed to do it the way they had up front. So I think, you know, at that point, it was clear to him that for the sake of the albums, they needed to be together to record because they were the only ones that had the work ethic and the chops to be able to, you know, perform. But from that point on, I think it was probably pretty clear that, you know, no one can replace the chemistry that Billy and Jimmy have together. So I'll step down from my pedestal now. I think it's, you know, I think it's that chemistry that creates the band, and, you know, the great touring musicians they have brought along with them have been fantastic, and they add great color, but they, you know, they are what they are.
Hey, Chris, what do you think about that?
When I first heard the news, I was kind of during the end of the Zwan era and the Billy Corgan solo period. I was kind of off and on the message boards and paying attention to what was going on with Billy and the Pumpkins. I remember when he posted the news advertisement about that he was intending on getting the band back together, so to speak, and I started kind of paying attention after that, and I just kind of assumed all along that Darcy and James were not going to be apart, just based on the fact that Darcy has been MIA for years now, as far as the public eye is concerned, and the comments that Billy made in his journal, I believe it was before the release of the Future Embrace solo album, where he said that James was pretty much the reason that the Smashing Pumpkins broke up in the first place. I just kind of assumed after that they weren't going to have a part in the band going forward. So it wasn't really much of a surprise when the news came out. And as far as disappointing, I guess kind of. Like, not enough for me to go on a message board rant about it or anything. Like, it was kind of like, oh, well, the band I grew up with, it's not the same band anymore. But the more I thought about it, like, they never were going to be the same band that I grew up with again. So, and that it wasn't Billy's intention. So there's no reason to bring James back, for instance, if that wasn't going to add anything to the band except for the nostalgic feel of, oh, there's James again, and he can do his rap like we played last week from the Double Door show.
Do that rap thing you do, James.
That's his contribution.
So I wasn't really that upset by it, and I didn't know anything about Jeff and Ginger or Lisa before the tour started, so I was just going to basically judge on how they sounded when they started touring and how the album sounded, which was pretty much going to be Billy and Jimmy again. So
pretty weird if you did know about them beforehand. I'm so friendlies.
What about you, Andrew? Were you totally upset that James wasn't bringing out the raps?
No, I'm of the same school of thought as most of you guys. Is that I knew once Billy put out the ad in the newspaper, in the Tribune, that the Smashing Pumpkins were probably going to be Billy and Jimmy, and what I think at that time Billy had already his live journal confessions where he described what James did the night of the Metro show, and told his side of the story, and the fact that relationship was poisoned. So I was okay with it. I thought it was always the back in the old days, it didn't make such a huge deal or it wasn't a huge deal to me that Billy would not monopolize the recording sessions for whatever his purposes were. When they played live shows, everyone had their little added their little colors, and that was a very important part of the Pumpkin history is what they did live together as much as what they did on those albums. And and certainly in later albums like Adore, there are certain tracks like I think about Shame for one in particular, is basically Billy, James, and Darcy sitting down and playing together on a drum machine. I think pretty much that what's on the album is them playing together, and so you have those moments of recorded history where the three of them are in that instance, the three of them are together and playing together on an album. So, it was Billy and James, or Billy and Jimmy are the one thread that goes through the whole history. And Billy is Smashing Pumpkins. It's his band. It's his ideas. It's his songs for 99% of the songs, and Jimmy Chamberlin is his closest musical muse. I mean, there's always that story. I can't remember where it came out originally, where they were in a van touring in their younger days, and Billy was humming a song in his head, and Jimmy next to him, who was had his drumsticks and was tapping out a song on the dashboard, and they were playing the same song. And I don't know if that story is true or not, but that
they
sort
probably
of
just heard it in a mall.
it's sort of it's a indication of how close, how important they are to record, to how together they are as a recording, as a unit making music.
They're life partners.
Yeah, almost.
And I would even say that, like you mentioned, Andrew, that it was really Billy and Jimmy all along in the continuity, and it really wasn't, because Jimmy was out of the band for the recording of the Adore album, and it's kind of, you could tell, like, if you just played all of the Pumpkins albums in a row for someone and said, which of these albums is the most different from the others and most does not go with the continuity of the others, I think it would be pretty clear that the answer is always going to be Adore. So clearly Jimmy missing made a big difference.
Darcy's absence on Machina wasn't as palpable.
No, I was going to say that, like, I don't think you could pick out Machina if I said which album is Darcy not playing on. Well,
no, she did record on that album though, didn't she?
I think she did, actually. Mm-hmm. I think they finished while she was still in the band.
Everything we just said is...
It was so inconsequential it didn't matter if she did or not, right?
Was she there or not? I don't even remember. Yeah, no, that's really bad. That's
She
really bad.
probably, if she was there, she probably doesn't remember either. So I think we're all even.
Well, I think she was there, but I mean, if she didn't play on the other albums, I don't know why she would have played on that one
Uh,
either.
Most people say that. I mean, I thought even the band says that starting with Melancholy, that the other members played a lot more. So, and I think that's fairly apparent.
Hmm.
Um, like James on Zero, James on Glass and the Ghost Children, really obvious James guitar parts on those songs.
It's true.
Um,
It's true.
so do I get to take a shot at this question?
Jump on in.
I suppose.
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah. Um,
Disagree with us. We're all agreeing too much.
I'm always prepared for that. My feeling on the whole thing is that James and Darcy don't get enough credit as people. They might actually get too much credit as musicians, which is weird because I know we've just spent the last however many minutes saying that they really didn't matter too much, but it's weird. I think with this regard to this reunion, what I see is that a bunch of people, basically fans, whoever else, they don't seem to accept or even think about the idea that James and Darcy might have other lives and be happy doing what they're doing, and might just not want to get back on the big rock and roll train. You know, it seems like they're both. I mean, from all reports, James is happy in New York and Darcy is happy on her farm in Michigan, and I don't know why there's this assumption everyone makes that they're just sitting around waiting for Billy Corgan to call them back up again. I mean, it's very strange. I think they're grown-ups. I think they don't want to do it. And then, here's the thing, though. I think some people do understand that they don't want to do it, but then they say, well, they don't want to do it because Billy Corgan is an asshole. And it's
Yeah.
like, so it jumps from, either they're sitting there waiting for him to call, or they don't want to have anything to do with that big jerk anymore. And it's like, kind of the same thing as Pajo. It's like, well, you met Billy, you were hanging around with him for a few years before the band became famous. Why were you sticking it out? And I think they had perfectly. I think they were fine sticking it out. I think again, it's kind of like it's again like this kind of negative view of them, of James and Darcy, that's out there, that Billy was just constantly like haranguing them and harassing them and beating them down, yet they just like sat there and took it, which I think is totally disrespectful to them. I don't think that's the way it was at all. I think they recognized Billy's talent and they recognized the downsides, and they said, you know what, it's worth it, and they slugged it out and played their part and were part of the band, and I give them a lot of respect for making that choice. That's a hard thing to recognize. I mean, think you're on the Chicago Bulls and then you look over there and Michael Jordan's playing, it's like, are you going to take the shot on every possession? Like most people who make it to the NBA are really good basketball players. It's got to be kind of hard to just, defer and pass to Jordan, but you've got to learn to pass to Jordan if the team is going to win, right? And, if Billy Corgan is the Michael Jordan of the Pumpkins, I think that's, okay, well, I'm not going to elaborate that comparison more, but go ahead, Jill.
Well, but I think you're onto something too, Jason, in that touring or being a part of the Smashing Pumpkins or being a part of any artistic collaboration, it is a job, and it's one of those kind of dirty little secrets that nobody, like Chris said, nobody wants to talk about the money aspect. Nobody wants to talk about how many hours you got to spend practicing and getting things right. And just like it is in the working world in corporate America, or corporate anywhere else for that matter, if you're in a position, if you're in a band that you are no longer being challenged by, or you're not happy in, you got to move on. And it's not necessarily a reflection of any one specific member of the parts, or it's not, it's a factor of many different things. And obviously, James and Darcy have other interests, and they've wanted to move on. They're not, clawing down the door, wanting to get back in the band. So I think that it's important to recognize that it's a two-way street. And Billy made no bones about the fact that he would have talked to them had they wanted to, rekindle the flame. So I think that it's it's a two-way street, and as much as people whine and complain about this isn't the band that I grew up with. Well, I'm not the person I was when I was growing up with this band. It's been 12, 13 years since I had become a fan of the Pumpkins, and I'm not the same as I was back then. So any sort of shot in the dark at achieving the nostalgic past of the Pumpkins is really kind of vacant. And I would really prefer that there are, members on the tour who are really excited to be there and really want to learn and grow and, flex their chops and have the energy. All these Jeff, Ginger, and Lisa are all kids compared to Jimmy and Billy. They have the energy that is required to keep up with the pace of the band, the pace of the touring schedule, etc. So I'd much rather them be there and be reverent for the personality that Darcy and James brought to the band at one point, but not insistent upon. They were a part of the band, but they've chosen not to remain that way.
So they're maybe the Tony Kukoc to Billy Corgan's Jordan.
All the respect in the world to Tony Kukoc and to Ron Harper.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like, they had to they recognized their role and they played it. Chris, I think you had a second part of what you wanted to make the discussion about, which is that, okay, given that James and Darcy are out, Jimmy called themselves the Smashing Pumpkins, and you wanted to know what we thought of that move. And
right.
I could volunteer my thoughts on that.
Go ahead.
Oh, great. Okay, I actually take a completely selfish view of this. I don't really, Jason, I don't really care about James and Darcy's feelings, to be quite honest. So 2007, I mean, okay, I care about it a little, but, like, not overly. It's like, James, if I could push a little lever and make him feel happier, I would do it. But,
That's so econ speak.
If the trade-off is, and here's some more econ speak for you. Okay, it's like Billy and Jimmy could have called themselves Corgan and Chamberlain, like Page and Plant. They could have gone on as Corgan and Chamberlain starting in 2007. And I think a lot of fans say, yeah, that's what they should have done. I think that would have been very unexciting. I think there would have not been many fans. I think there would not have been much press. And you say, fine, play with fewer fans, play with less press. That's less exciting. This is rock and roll. I mean, like, this is about entertainment, this is about excitement, and it's about pressure. And calling, for Billy Corgan, calling him what he's doing the Smashing Pumpkins, I think there's ample evidence at this point to say that he calls himself to another level.
It's his A-game.
There's something about the Pumpkins that brings out Billy's A-game. That's absolutely right. And you know what? I want the A-game. And if the trade-off is I get Billy's A-game and James and Darcy feel bad, great. Give me the A-game, give me, quote-unquote, the Smashing Pumpkins, and give me Billy and Jimmy and a big bunch of fans who are excited and interested and controversy and all those things. And
something for us to talk about on the podcast.
Yep. Yeah. Everything's on the line for some reason when it's the Smashing Pumpkins, and that's the way it should be, and absolutely, and I'm sorry, James and Darcy, if your feelings are hurt a little, but it's worth it for me, and I'm me, what can I say?
And I think you could really tell, like, I think Billy even made a mention, Billy or Jimmy made a mention during this Juan era that they had to try to write songs that didn't sound like the Smashing Pumpkins. Yeah. And the same where, I mean, Billy's solo album clearly is Billy trying not to sound like the Smashing Pumpkins or Juan, just like a total reaction in the other direction. And I know there's fans of both of these things, but to me it's just not the same. Like, clearly if you're trying not to do something, it doesn't sound as good as if you're trying to do something. And I think that with the Pumpkins, they have more freedom to do what they want to do and not have to worry about, oh, does this sound too much like something we've done in the past, or does this sound too much like we're trying to be the Pumpkins? Because they are the Pumpkins.
I think if you're totally right. If you listen to Juan, clearly there are some boundaries. Like, the music is like circumscribed. There's like places beyond which it just can't go. Like Spilled Milk for whatever reason, maybe Matt Sweeney is just standing there looking at you like, you dork, or something, but like there's some place that like, I mentioned Spilled Milk because it's like, that was Swan's metal song or something, and it just doesn't go there like the Pumpkins would go there. Swan never goes there like the Pumpkins would go there. And the funny thing is, I really liked Swan and I was enjoying it. And then these, Billy did the solo career, and then it comes back to the Pumpkins, and I was kind of half paying attention. And then, you get Zeitgeist, and you hear the new Pumpkins material, and you see them in concert, it's like, oh yeah, this is I remember this. This, like, the band that would go there. They would push those boundaries. They were playing pop rock with 3 layered guitars, and yada, 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 and, just, so I completely agree. Swan had rules. Swan was about being cool in some ways, and the Pumpkins are more about, like, trying, as we've amply discussed earlier.
Well, and it's interesting, too, because Billy addresses this in that documentary or that whatever reality television show with Uli John Roth. He talks about how precisely what you're saying, Jason, that today's audiences, they don't want to hear a long, drawn-out solo. They don't want to hear you take it to the next level and, step on stage with guitar wankery in mind. They want to hear the sort of sweet, concise, very nugget...
That thing you do.
Exactly. Exactly. They want to hear that very popularized approach to songwriting. And he seems to really kind of regret that in this interview. He does it anyway, but he regrets that people don't want to, or he laments that people don't want to hear that, because that's where he really enjoys taking it. And Uli John Roth has made a career of doing that, so it was quite interesting.
I think it's a wise choice to try to hit it 50-50. Meet the crowd halfway. Because you've got to maintain that excitement level, but you've also got to push them, and you've got to push yourself. So I think that's what he tries to do.
Right, and I think that he even stated in the documentary that he had an internal conflict about initially when he was trying to start writing pop songs that were catchy. He said, he said that he really hesitated to write anything that was even remotely catchy because it indicated a level of selling out to the masses that he did not want to go there. And I'm assuming this was way back, in the Gish era days.
This is probably 1987 in November. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, touche, I guess. But
listen to the Marked and then listen to the Smashing Pumpkins demo tape.
Stained Glass Window was catchy. You can't deny that.
Oh, gosh. But this kind of to resolve what he's willing to do and not do for the sake of the Smashing Pumpkins, and kind of hitting that 50-50, compromise, I guess.
Maybe the fans are right sometimes, though. I mean, Jill, I often tell you that you have permitted me somehow to embrace pop music. So, I think I used to have those sorts of conflicts as a listener, and then it's like, wait, if your gut says you like it, then you like it, Forget whether everyone else likes it, and I think that's what Billy... I tend to think that's what Billy thinks he's doing, listening to his gut.
Alright, so I guess we're all in agreement here that they should have come back as the Smashing Pumpkins like they did with or without James and Darcy. It's too bad. I was hoping for a little bit of conflict here, but we are getting close to our time here. So Andrew, why don't you let us know what happened this week in Pumpkins history?
All right. Well, this week, not a whole lot happened I could find. So I decided to go for this month in pumpkin history. Seems how we're now fully into May. And what came out in May of 1990 was the Pumpkins' first commercial release. It was the I Am One single, released on Limited Potential Records, a little small record label in Chicago. It had it was a 7-inch vinyl 7-inch vinyl record. Back in the old days when people still had record players. I guess people CDs were only about 5 years old at that point, but
But you don't have a
The
record player, Andrew?
No,
Oh,
not,
you are so uncool.
so
Can't-
the so I Am One was included. I Am One, of course, and the B side was Not Worth Asking, which was I'm sure it's a song that when people are going to be looking forward to the pre-Gish era shows, will be a favorite on a lot of people's wish list. It's one of mine.
It's a good song.
Well, it's a good song from that era. It's very new. It's a very much from their new agey days, and it's a fine effort.
A fine pop effort.
So the pretty it's one of the more notable. It's one of the more desirable pumpkin rarities to this day. There were only 1,500 of these singles printed in the first place, and the most famous rarity of all, of course, is the it's the test pressing, which is probably the holy grail of pumpkin rarities. There are apparently 3 in existence, and Billy has 2, and there's one that is out there someone owns. And
we'll be giving one away next week on the Hipsters United podcast. No.
It's out there.
Only if the total somehow increases to 4. We just printed one.
Go back in time and make them print another one. Yes. So that's this week Puppy History as a go for this month, because we don't SPFC doesn't have the exact date it was released, but it was released in May of 1990.
That's where it all began. Well, that's about all the time we have this week. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and thanks to whoever posted a review of our podcast on iTunes. So part of the idea for this week's in-depth discussion came from a listener comment on the show notes at hipstersunited.com. So if any of you have a question that you'd like the panel to debate, preferably something we can fight with each other about and not all agree on, like this week, leave a comment or contact us at www.hipstersunited.com/blog/contact. So with our theme of band harmony and or discord this week, this week's song of the week is Farewell and Good Night from Rotterdam, Netherlands on April 5th, 1996, and it features the vocal stylings of Billy, James, Darcy, and Jimmy. So good night, everyone. Thanks for joining me.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
God bless you. Thank you.
The Hipsters United podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Smashing Pumpkins or Warner Brothers Reprise Music. All opinions offered by panelists or guests of the Hipsters United podcast are their own and do not represent the opinions of the Smashing Pumpkins. All audio used during the show is licensed for non-profit use per the terms and conditions on the Live Music Archive at archive.org. Intro music is from the Machina 2 album released for free download on the internet by the Smashing Pumpkins in August of 2000.